Going to experiment with offering the message here in video space, and we're on Transfiguration Sunday. Going to be reading from the translation of the New Testament, David Bentley Hart. Um, and after 6 days, Jesus takes Peter and James and John and privately leads them up alone to a high mountain. And he was transfigured before them, and his garments became an exceedingly brilliant white, a white such as no fuller on earth can produce. And Moses and Elijah were seen by them, and they were conversing with Jesus. And Peter, speaking out, says to Jesus, Rabbi, it is a good thing for us to be here, and let us make 3 tabernacles, one for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah. For he did not know what expostulation to make, for they had become extremely afraid. And a cloud arose, overshadowing them, and there came a voice from the cloud, This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him. And looking around, they all at once saw no one with them any longer, save Jesus alone. And as they were coming down out of the mountain, he enjoined them that they should not relate the things they saw to anyone, except when the Son of Man should rise from among the dead. And they seized upon this phrase for themselves, debating what this rise from among the dead means. And they questioned him, saying, Why do the scribes say that it is necessary for Elijah to come first? And he said to them, Elijah indeed coming first will restore all things. And how has it been written about the Son of Man that he should suffer many things and be held in contempt? But I tell you that Elijah has also come, and they did whatever things to him they wished, as has been written about him. The thing about the Transfiguration in Mark, it sits right in the middle of the text, right at the center, and many close readers of Mark have said that probably in a way you could say that this is like a resurrection in miniature, or a resurrection of Jesus moved into the center of the Gospel of Mark, and the Gospel of Mark uniquely doesn't have a resurrection appearance in the same way that some of the other Gospels do. So, like, if you're reading Mark, in order to get an appearance of Jesus in, like, the way that he seemed as resurrected in some of the other Gospels, you have to look to this Transfiguration event. And then that begs the question, why does Mark put it in the center? Why is it situated here like this, which is unusual? And then there's the bigger question, and this is what becomes very, very interesting, is basically, if you're up on the mountain with Jesus and you've been following him to this point, and this happens, what would your response be? So, it's humorous that Peter comes up with these ideas of these tents, tabernacles that he's supposed to build, and that's his idea about how to respond to the transfiguration of Jesus. But if you asked a group of people what they would do if they encountered some kind of religious event that was outside the range of their experience, you'd find out that people really do have widely varying responses. Some people might just, seeing something that odd or that strange or outside of their experience, they might just literally walk away. Or another very common response to strange religious events is to act as if it's not even happening. It could have been that the disciples would have been there, seen that, and then just quietly not said anything at all and acted like the world was normal and Moses and Elijah weren't there with Jesus. So at least Peter gets credit for trying to make sense of this unsensible experience of the Transfiguration. And then there's the whole issue, there's many issues in this text or this story. There's the whole issue of how alone they are. The text repeats over and over again that he went up alone by himself. They went down alone by themselves. It's a moment that's very cut off from the rest of the disciples, the rest of all the people that have been following Jesus around. It's very cloistered in that way. So, of course, people wonder why the Transfiguration would be so cloistered. And then additionally, beyond the cloistering of it is the secrecy of it, so that there's this command at the end of it as they're going back down from the mountain not to tell the story to anyone, the messianic secret that Jesus often enjoins of the disciples not to tell other people about who they're discovering that he is until the right time. And then finally, there's the odd mystery of Elijah himself. Apparently, many people were waiting for the return of Elijah. Elijah had gone up bodily to heaven, and so he's one of the few people who, if there was going to be the return of somebody religious, Elijah would be an obvious possibility. And Jesus doesn't actually, negate that possibility. Instead, he does say that Elijah is going to come again. So within the tradition, you have this possible scene that when Jesus comes back, in whatever form that Jesus is going to come back, that leading the way and ahead of Jesus is Elijah. Some people even imagine, for example, that he would come, like on the same chariot that he left in, and that there would be this arrival of this Elijah chariot before Jesus the Messiah arrives. So you get this very kind of dramatic possible scenery. And the brightness, the fuller's soap, the bleached clothes, the hill with Moses and Elijah. And you're confronted, if you read this story, with this surreal, don't know if that might be the right word, awe-inspiring moment. And then if you're listening to it, you're left having to ask yourself, how do I respond to something so dramatic in the life of Jesus? I've been following him. I've been called as one of his disciples. I want to live kind of an ethical pattern of life in a way similar to his. I feel a great sympathy to or relationship to him. And now there's been placed this kind of distance, this distancing, this elevation into his life, that he is both so close to us and among us as a possibility of who we can be in him, and then also now so upward towards God on the mountain and among these two men who walk with God. And you could wonder for yourself, how could I ever be part of that? And then right in the middle of it, like this beautiful center, as distant and as mystical and as numinous and as awe-inspiring and as elevated and ascended as Jesus seems to be and transfigured in this moment, when the voice of God comes and speaks about or to him, the words that come, they're not words of judgment, they're not words of distance, they're not words of condescension. They very simply say to the disciples this little phrase: "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." That's the transfiguration. All the other stuff is accoutrements, decorations. You can demythologize a lot of that stuff if you want. I don't know why you would want to, because it's such a beautiful story, but you can. But at the center is this whole other thing. The transfiguration is the transfiguration of how we are called to think about ourselves, because we're in Christ. We're being incorporated into this one Christ. And what he is he's beloved of God, and we're supposed to listen to him, because what we're supposed to learn from him is that in him we're also beloved of God. And so then what the transfiguration does is it points you back and out to the rest of the gospel. Go back to the rest of the gospel and hear all the different kinds of things that Jesus has been saying. Pay attention to them. See who he challenges and who he heals, who he comforts and who he how he speaks. What does Jesus say? What is this word that he brings? Go back and pay attention to the rest of the Gospels and see what Jesus says, and what he says to whom, and how he says it, and what's the collective and cumulative sense of what he has to say. And he has the imprimatur, the blessing of this voice, God. And he's beloved of God. He's going around on this mission. He's headed to the cross, incorporating all of those who are trusting him into his community, into this beloved community, so that all those who are going along with him, who have left behind all the things that Jesus challenges and are picking up the things that Jesus elevates and loves, and gives us assurance that we can know that who this God is, who this Jesus is love and beloved.